Hi guys, in this video we are going to build a flexible reusable card component in React. This project gives us an opportunity to practice the fundamentals that matter in real-world React development: components, props parsing, destructuring, composition, variants, and even some design system thinking. But we are not stopping at the basics. As the project grows, we will introduce hooks, side effects, data fetching, and even a custom hook to manage selection state. By the end, you will have a card component that supports icons, customizable backgrounds, flexible content, clean API design, and real interactivity, all without inline styles. We will be using classes. In this project, I'm not going to explain CSS. I'll be just pasting directly the code, CSS code in the CSS files. So we will start the project. We will use white, and the command is, you see, OK to proceed. We click yes. OK, we are being asked if you want to use vanilla JavaScript, Vue, or React. We are going to opt for React. We don't want to use TypeScript. We want to use JavaScript. Installing npm, we take the option yes. And now dependencies are installed by the npm for us. So the roadmap is that we will start with a static card, and then we will add props and destructuring. After that, we will introduce variants and icon background classes. The next stage will be adding icon support with a default fallback, and after that we will add composition using children. The next stage will be adding hover interaction and a responsive grid to our project. After that, we will load data from a local module, from a local file, and after that we will fetch data from a mock API using the useEffect hook, and after that we will add interactivity with a custom hook, and at the end we will polish the component into a design system primitive. As you can see that we can open this URL to see that the project is ready. So let me copy the URL. You can do control click and here it is. So this is the structure of our project. The name of our project is cards project. We have nsrc folder, and then we will make some other folders like components, hooks, and styles, etc. So the name of our project is cards project. Let's cd into it. We can do npm install. We will be using a package for handling different CSS classes, and the name of the package is class names. Let's install that one. Okay, now let's open the project in our VS Code. So file, open folder. Inside our src folder, we don't need that assets, so we can delete this safely. We also don't need the app.css, so we'll delete this. There is a lot of CSS code that we don't need. We will be writing our own code. So I'm going to delete all of this code and replacing it with just this one body with a margin of 0, minimum height of 100, display, vertical height, display, flex, and place items in center. We can save this. Inside the src, I'm going to create a new folder with the name styles. Inside styles, I'm going to create a file base.css, and inside base.css we have some CSS code here. Like this is code for the body, this is code for the root with 100%, and this is for the OLA, heading to rem, display of flex, and justify, and this. Now inside the styles, I'm going to have more CSS. Let's make another CSS file with the name card.css. Here I have pasted code for the card.css. This is code for a card with a background color, border radius of 0.75 rem, padding, width, border, etc. This is for the card icon wrapper. This is for the card icon placeholder, for the card title, and for the text on the card. Now we are going to make a third CSS file with the names utilities.css. Utilities.css. I have pasted the code for utilities.css. Icon BG slate, icon BG background blue, background green, background amber. These are the options that we are going to give to our user. And then there are the different card variants: a flat card, an elevated card, and an outlined card. Let's save these changes. Now I'm going to make another folder for different components that we are going to have in our projects. We will also have hooks later on, so let's make a folder for hooks. And now to begin with, our first component, we don't have any component at the moment in this folder. Let's make our first component card with the extension J6. We will be using JavaScript, so this is card.j6. Let's close all the other CSS files. We'll save them. Save. Okay, so what is a card? A card is this is the first component that we are going to make in this folder of components. So what is a component? React applications are built from components. They are small, reusable pieces of user interface that encapsulate structure, styling, and behavior. So a component can be as simple as a button or as complex as an entire page layout. The goal is always the same: to isolate logic, keep things reusable, and make your user interface predictable. Now in this project, our card component will evolve from a static user interface block into a fully reusable design system primitive. So we will be starting from a static UI block, from a static user interface blocks at this stage of our project. So let's start by importing from our styles folder card.css. And then we write export default function card. We always start with export default function card. The name of the component is card. This is a function. This is a function, and we are making it export default so that we can export later on import it in another component, app component of our project. So let's start by writing a very simple basic component by just returning an article, which is J6, and we will be giving the class name of card dash flat, and then inside this article we are going to make a div, and this div will have a class name of card underscore underscore icon wrapper icon BG, and let's use the color slate. Now inside this div, we are going to use another div. And for this div, we are going to have a class name of card underscore underscore icon dash placeholder. So this is a placeholder, so we don't need this one. This is an icon placeholder. And after this div, we can write an h3 element, and for this h3 we can use the card title, class name of card title, and here we can give the title of the card. Let's say, for example, easy deployment. And after the h3 element, we can have a paragraph element, which I'm sure that you know from the basic HTML. And to this we can give a class name of card text. Here you can have some text. Let's write the traditional text. So now you can see that this is our simple basic static component. So we are just returning JSX. Here is the article tag. We are using different class names, like here we are using the card name with a card, and then card dash dash flat. The variant is flat. We are putting it, hard coding it here. And then we have another div, and this div is for the icon that we are going to use on the card icon wrapper, icon bg slate color. That's also we are hard coding here. And then we have an icon placeholder here, and after that we are using an h3 element with the text easy deployment, and then we are using a paragraph element with this text. Let's save this. Now we go to the app.jsx file. You can do like command P and search for it directly. App.jsx. Okay. We have contents from the template. We are going to delete all of this, and we are going to write our own code in this. First of all, we import our base.css from the folder styles. Then we import the card component. We can see here that this is inside the components folder. We can just click it. Export default function app. And then we return inside the parenthesis main with class name is equal to app, and then we compose our card inside. So this is the class that we are going to use with the main app, and then we have this card component, which is this card.jsx file, card.jsx component. So we are composing it inside the app component. So app component is the parent component, and this is the daughter component, the card.jsx, our basic static card. We can save it. Okay, now to our card component. Oh, I forgot the other CSS class because we are using his card-flat, which we have here in the utilities.css, like here .card-flat, border 1px solid, blah blah blah. So I'm going to import this as well. Import utilities.css. Okay, now let's run in a terminal. Oh. So I'm inside the project folder cars project, and I will run npm run dev, and then I take this URL to go to my Chrome browser, and here I can see our static card, but the card is not the way I want it to. It's stretching across the screen. Let's see what's the problem with the CSS. So the class name is app with capital A, and if we go to the base.css here, so here we can see that it is small a and pp. So we can copy it and we can go back to our app component and save the class name there, and then go back to our page, and now we can see that we have a card component that is exactly in the center with an icon, a placeholder with the text. The text is this one, and this is the title. This was the H3 title, and this was the P paragraph tag. So this was the first part of our project in which we have created a basic component, and then we have done composition by composing the basic card component in our app component, and now we have a static card. So we have a nice single nice style card on the screen. It does not do anything dynamic yet, but it gives us a solid visual foundation, and from this solid visual foundation we are going to build a dynamic one later on. So let's proceed to the second step, the second part of our project, which is props and destructuring variant props. So why are we going to use props? Because we don't want our card to be a static one, we want it to be a dynamic one. Now that we have a static card, it's time to make it reusable. Currently it is not reusable because we have hard-coded the text, we have hard-coded the title, and we have hard-coded the style and variant of the card, like it's a flat one, and we don't want it to be a static one, we want a reusable component. So it's time to make it reusable, and this is where props comes in. So in card.jsx, this one, our basic component, in this card.jsx component, we need to update the component's signature. This one, we need to update the component signature so that it can accept the title, the text, and the variant. And then we will use destructuring directly in the function parameters to pass to get all the props that we pass from our app component. So we want our app component to pass like the title of the card and the text for the card, as well as the variant. We can give a default of flat to this one. There will be different values like flat, elevated, and outline. If the app component composes the card component but does not pass this property of variant, so the default one will be flat. So that is why we are writing variant is equal to flat, because this is the default value for the variant. Okay, here we are directly destructuring it. So like we will be getting props from the app component. These properties will be passed by this app component, to this card component here, and you can, for example, check it in your by doing console.logs and props. You can check it like that, and we can also destructure them like this here from these props. You can give it like, for example, we can use title, text, and variant is equal to flight from props. We can get them here like this. But the tradition is to do them directly over here like that and skip this step. So now that we have access to the title and the text and the variant, we can use them directly over here and remove this hard-coded part of h3np. Okay, we don't want to use this card.flat because this is just the default value. But if we get the other variants from the parent component, then we would need to handle those cases also. And for that, we have already installed the package class names. So I'm going to import class names from class names. Now we are going to use the class name package. So card is the first class that we are going to use, and then for different variants we are going to select one of the available options. For that, we are going to pass an object to the package class name as a second argument. So the different options that we have are, like, we have a class card flight, and if the variant passed is equal to flight, like this variant that we are destructuring here, that we are getting from the app component, from the parent component, if that is equal to flight, then this will become true, which means that the card flight will become true, and this will become a part of this class name, const class name. So we will have card and card dash dash flight. If the variant pass is not flight and it is card dash dash elevated, in that case the variant is equal to elevated will become true, and then we will have class name equal to card and card dash dash elevated. The next choice that we have is card dash dash outlined. And then we can remove this hard-coded class names here, and instead we can add the class names. This class name that we have here. Okay, so this class name, we are going to use it here for the article class name is equal to class name. And now what we can do is to remove this hard-coded h3 and instead make sure that we have the title here destructured, that it is true, and if it is true, then we are going to show an h3 element. And inside that h3 element, we are going to show the title. This title we are going to get here. And then here we have the class name is equal to card underscore underscore title. And now we are going to remove this hard-coded text and the whole component, and instead we are going to use the one that has been passed from the parent component app texts. If text is true, if it is not null or undefined, then show it as a p tag, and here we are going to dynamically get the text for this component from the destructured variable text here. So we are going to show it there, and here we are going to have a class name of card underscore underscore text. So now our card has become dynamic, but we have to pass these props from the parent component app. So we save it here, then we go to the app component, and here we can pass it, like we can pass the title, easy deployment, and we can pass the text to the daughter component, which is the same text that we had there hard-coded, and we also need to pass the variant, which is, let's say, elevated. The default one is flat, so therefore we are going to send an elevated here to the card component from the parent component app component. Let's save all this. And we can see that we have the title here and we have the text here, and this has not been hard-coded in the component card here. We are passing it as props from the app component, which is the parent component, to the daughter component card, which we have composed here inside the app component. So this is a clean example of prop passing and destructuring. The parent decides what the card should display and which visual variant it should use, while the card itself stays generic and reusable. We have just turned a static card into a configurable component with a clear API. So in this case, the parent can change the title, or the parent can change the text and pass any text, and that title and text, it will be shown invariably by the card.jsx, the daughter component here. So it's not hard-coded over here. Not only the title and text, but also the variant. Now let's make the card more expressive by introducing icons. Let's create a new component, cloud upload icon.jsx. In the component folder, we create this cloud upload icon.jsx. I'm not going to write the cloud here, the code here. I have just pasted the whole code. Here we are imported the card.css from the styles, and this is the name of the component that we are exporting here, exporting the export default function. This component is just returning an SVG for the icon that we are going to use here on this card. So I'm going to just save it over here, and then we go back to our card.jsx here. In our card component, I'm going to add two props. One is icon for the card, which is a JSX element, and then icon BG, which is one of the four predefined here, one of the four predefined background variant, like icon-bg- slate, blue, green, or amber. So the user can choose between these four predefined variants. Now let's go to the card.css, and at the end of the file add some CSS for the card icon. So it's just the width, height, and color of the icon. We save it, and now we go back to the card and here add a default for the icon BG. Like, let's say we add a default of slate. The other options are blue, green, and amber, but we use slate as a default over here. Now that we have different variations for the icon BG and different variations for the variant of the card, we will have to write new class names over here. So we will have to write one, let's say card class name, and the other one for the icon BG class name. So let's rename it as a card class name. And then we have this card over here, and then we have card flat, card elevated, and card outline. It's the same. I have just changed the name card class. So we have one for the card class name, and now we will have one for the icon BG. So this is for the icon BG class name. We have 4 possibilities: slate, blue, green, and amber. The default one is slate. For example, if the app component does not pass any props here for the icon BG, then the default one is slate, which means that this will be true. Then for icon BG class name, we will have a value of card icon wrapper and icon BG slate. If the icon BG has a value of green, for example, then this will become true, this will return true. So icon BG green will have a value of true. This will be the key and the value will be true, which means that the class icon BG class name will have the class name of card icon wrapper and icon BG green. And the icon prop that we are destructuring here, let's make sure that we have an icon. So we take a const icon to render, and let's use the nullish coalescing operator, which returns the right hand value only if the left hand value is null or undefined. So if we have an icon, use the icon, assign icon to render. But if we don't have an icon, if it is null or if it is undefined, then use this cloud upload icon. This cloud upload icon that we have here we are returning just an SVG, giving it a class name of card icon. And this is the cloud upload icon that we are going to return if icon is not supplied by the parent component, the app component, to its daughter component card.jsx. So this is what we are going to have here in the icon to render. Either it will have an icon, but if icon is undefined or if it is null, then we will be using cloud upload icon. It will be assigned to icon to render. Okay, and that icon to render, that will be used instead of this icon placeholder. We do not want any hard-coded placeholders anymore. So we will be using that icon placeholder here, icon to render here. So this is the icon to render now. Either it will be the cloud upload icon or it will be the icon supplied by the app, the parent component. And here the hard-coded class name will be removed, and instead we will be using the icon BG class name here. And here we will be using the card class name. So to the whole card we are giving this card class name, and this icon BG class name, it will be used here for the icon BG class name. And if we have an icon, we will be using it here. Otherwise we will be using the cloud upload icon. Now that we have used both the newly passed icon and icon BG props here, let's save this file and let's go to our app component to make sure that we are passing these two new props. Like at the moment we are passing title, text and variant, but we need to pass those new two variants, icon and icon BG. If we don't supply icon BG, okay, it will be using Slate as a default. And if we don't use icon, we don't supply icon, then the default one will be cloud upload icon. But if we want to pass them, we can pass them over here. Let's pass the icon. Cloud upload icon, which we are going to import from components, this one. So let's pass this as an icon, and then for the icon BG, let's pass it a color of blue. Save this. And now we have this icon with a color of blue. The cloud upload icon with a color of blue that we have passed over there. Note that here I am passing a JSX element. A JSX element here as a props to this card component. So this demonstrates. Next, we make the card more flexible by supporting composition through children. Let's add some CSS classes first to the card.css. We go to the styles folder and card.css and add new classes over here. This is for the footer of the card footer class, and then we want to link it, so card link, and then we will be adding hovering effect later on. So this is the class for the hovering effect. We save these changes. We go back to our card, and here we are going to accept a new prop called children. Then we come over here and we check if the children is true. Then we add a new div, and that new div will render the children. Since we have already checked that the children is true, so once this children is true, this div will be rendered. We will be adding the class name, and the class name that we need to add is this one, the card footer. So we are going to add this card footer. Okay, now we are ready with the component card. Now we need to go back to the parent component app, and we are going to send children from here. So these children will be, this will be the footer on the card. So we are going to send an anchor hyperreference class name of card link. This is the one here, card link. And the text shown will be learn more. So here we can see that the children that we are sending from the app component to the daughter component card is shown over here, learn more. So this has made our card component more flexible. This is a classic React pattern. The card controls the structure, the card component is controlling the structure, but the parent controls the content. It makes the component far more flexible without complicating the API. Let's introduce the hovering effect and the grid layout. Here we can see in the app component that we are just rendering one card. What about a grid of cards? If we have 3 or 4 or more than one cards, so how are we going to show a grid of cards? So let's make some changes to the CSS. We go to the base.css and paste these 2 new classes over here. This class will override the one that we already have here up. If we have here, yes, this one. So we also need to add to card.css 2 new classes. This is for the hovering effect, and this we are introducing some transition over here. We have this card class over here, but since this comes later in the file, so this one will be overriding. This definition of class card will be overriding the first one. After saving them, we close these 2 classes, these 2 files, and then we go back to the app where we delete this one so that we can introduce a grid of cards over here. But we need data first. So for that, we are going to paste some data here. So what I have pasted is just data for cards. Like this one is with icon background blue. The variant is elevated. The title is easy development with an ID of 1. Another card is with a variant of flat, an icon BG of green. The text is this one. The title is this one. The ID is 2. This one is with an icon BG of amber. A variant is outlined. So we have 3 different variants: an outlined, a flat, and an elevated. Similarly, we have 3 different colors: blue, green, and amber for the icon BG. They have different IDs because they are unique different cards that we are going to render. And now this array cards has data for 3 cards. So here inside the main class, we are going to create a section, and this section will have a class name of cards grid. Now inside here we are going to write some JavaScript. So for that we need the curly brackets. Inside the curly braces, we are going to map over our array of cards, which has data for 3 cards. We will be getting 1 card at a time, and we will return a card component. That card component will need a key because we are generating a list. Whenever we are mapping over an array and we are kind of generating a list, we need different we need to use a key which is distinct. So for key, we can use the value of ID. The title is card.title. Here we have ID, we have title, we have text, we have variant, and we have icon BG. So that was the title. For text, we are going to use card.text. For variant, we are going to use card.variant. For icon, we are going to use the one that we have imported above, this one that we have imported from the components folder. This is the icon we are going to use for all the 3 cards inside the grid. And for the icon BG, we have different colors. So we are going to use card app.icon.bg. And here we are going to pass the children that we already wrote a few minutes ago. Let's check our grid and the hovering effect. So here is our grid. We have 3 cards now instead of 1 card on the user interface. We can see that the learn more is underlined when we hover over it, and the pointer changes to the hand. Okay, these cards are too close to one another. Let's go to the card.css and add some margin bottom. Margin bottom of 15px. We save it and go back to that. And here now we can see the gap between the cards inside the grid. So now the hovering effect is working, and we can see a grid of cards. So this is like if you have a e-commerce shop and you have, let's say you want to show 15 or 20 products on the same page. You can have a different layout for the grid, but you can show 1 product per card, and your grid can arrange all those products, and you can make them clickable so that the user can click for more details and go to an individual details page for that product. Let's close this, and this is where all the data is. In the next step, we are going to get this data from a separate file instead of hard coding it in the app.jsx, because this is making the app.jsx component very long. We don't want to have a lot of clutter inside the app.jsx. So we will be going to extract this in the next step and getting this data from a separate file, cards.js. So we will cut this array from here. And make a separate file here. Inside the src, we are going to create a folder data, and inside this folder we are going to create cards.js and paste our array over here, the cards array. Then we need to export it so that we can use it, and save it. Now that we have saved it, we can import it here. So this is the card component, but we don't want the card component, we want cards. This one. From the data folder and the cards file. We save everything over here, and we check our cards and refresh the page, and we can see that our cards are still working. The data is coming now from the card.js instead of the hard-coded data inside the app.js. But this isn't how real apps work. Like, we don't have data coming from a cards.jsx files. Often the data comes from a real backend. So let's make a server.js file in a new folder API to demonstrate this. So we are going to make a new file inside the src, a new folder, and call it an API. Inside the API, we will make a new file, server.js. We will be using Express and Core. So let's install those 2 packages. I'm inside the folder cards project. Here I'm going to install Express and course. Okay, this is installed. We go back to our server.js file. So what we are going to do is to make a simple mock API using nodes HTTP module or Express. Here we have installed Express, so we will be using Express. Okay, we will run it separately. When we will be running this server, this backend, we will use this command from src API folder, and the file is this one where we are writing the code now, server.js. So let's import Express that we have installed. And let's import course. We will be creating an instance of the Express called app, and app will use course. We will be calling the course, and then we have our array of cards which we can just copy from here. So we have copied our array of cards. Let's edit one card to it with an ID of, let's say, 4, because we have already used 1, 2, 3 IDs, with a title of this global availability. Let's the property text get a value of this. We'll be using a variant of flat, and the icon BG of color slate. So now we have 4 cards, data for 4 cards, which will be served by our server. Now that we have this app here, we can use the app and call its method get. And passing it request and response res. Response.json, and the data will be passed from the cards. This data will be passed here, and we are changing it to JSON by calling the method JSON, res.json. The port used will be 4000, and then we can start listening. App.listen. We will pass the port, which is 4000, and an inline function. So that we know that the server has started. Mock API running on http://localhost : and we will get the port number dynamically. Let's save this file. Let's run our server after saving the file server.js. I'm already in the directory cards project. We run the server using the command node src, and the folder is API inside the src, and the file name is server.js. Oops, we got an error. Okay, unexpected token on line 32 in server.js. Inside the server.js, line 32. Okay, so we forgot a comma over here when we were adding the fourth card. Now I save it, go back to the file there and run it once more. And now our mock API is running on localhost 400 or 4000. Let's copy this and go to localhost 4000. Oops, we see that it's not working. Let's check our package.json to see if Express is installed. Okay, the Express version installed is 5.2.1, and I have found out that it doesn't work with the local host. So we have to make changes in our server.js file. Express 5 sometimes fails to bind to the IPv4 local host, especially on Mac operating system. Since I'm using a Mac operating system, so it might be the reason that it is giving me a problem and I cannot go to the local host. So we have to make these changes in the server.js file. Instead of downgrading Express to Express 4, I can just explicitly type over here to use 127.0.0.1. So after that, we are going to save the file. We stop the server by pressing Ctrl C and then run the command node src API server.js again. Okay, I forgot to change this message to localhost, so I need to stop the server again over here and then go back there and change over here from localhost to this one so that we can see exactly this message 127.0.0.1/cards. So the mock API is running on this one, and the data will be available on /cards. So let's save these changes, go back to the terminal, run again the node src command. Now we can see that this is the API URL. So let's go to the API URL and change it to http://127.0.0.1 127.0.0.1:4000. Okay, we can see that the server is running. We are not getting any error message, and now we need to go to the URL cards where we can get our data. This is our data. So our backend is working fine. It is serving the data. We can get this array from our API, from this URL, from the backend, and we can map over it in our app component in the front end and show the cards. Okay, now that we are fetching data from this API, we need a place to store the data inside our component. I close the server.js, go back to the app.jsx. So we have to introduce two pieces of state because the data fetched from the API needs to be stored somewhere inside our component. So we need to introduce these two pieces of state here, and for them we need some imports. So I'll be importing the useEffect hook and useState from React. And now inside this component, app component, we need to introduce the state cards, and then we have a setter method set cards. And inside the use state, we will be initializing it with a blank array. And then we need to show when the data is loading and a setter method loading. And we also need to initialize it with true. So these are the two new states, cards and loading, with two respective setter methods, set cards and set loading, that we are going to use in this component. State lets a component remember information between renders. So if we render the component once and then we re-render it, so this state will help the data remember what are the values of cards. Like this cards is an array once we populate it from the backend. So re-rendering the app and re-rendering this component, it will not delete the data. The data will persist. So it will remember the information between the renders. And the cards will hold the data we get back from the API. We know about this. And loading lets us show a loading message while the request is in progress. Sometimes the backend can take time, the network can take time. So we need to show on the user interface to the user what's happening. So this loading state, it will let us show a loading message while the request is still in progress. We will be using useEffect. After the states, we will be using useEffect, and we will be importing it as well. Okay, we are already importing it over here. So why do we use the useEffect? To actually fetch the data, we need to run some code when the component first loads. In React, we do this with useEffect. So useEffect is actually a React's way of handling side effects. What are side effects? Side effects are things that happen outside the normal render cycle, like fetching data, subscribing to some kind of events, or updating the document title, etc. So by putting our fetch call inside the useEffect, we tell the React to run this code when the component mounts. That is the perfect place to load our cards from the API. Let's type the body of the function. This is an async function. Let's name it fetch cards. We will use a try catch block. Inside the try block, we will have a response res and await fetch. We will be using fetch, and then we give the URL, which is http://localhost:4000. We have to copy this one because we changed the local host, so we are going to write, copy and paste this one. http://127.0.0.1:4000/cards. After fetching, we can get the data from response from res in the JSON format by calling the JSON function, and then using the setter function set cards, we can pass the data to set the data here, and now we have access to all those data in cards, and we map over the cards here. So there are no changes here inside this map function. The second argument which we pass to this useEffect function, it is an array of dependencies. The dependency array controls when the effect runs. So when this effect runs, this effect, which is the first argument to useEffect, so this is controlled by this dependencies array. An empty array means run this effect once on mount and never again. So if we put values inside this array, the effect would rerun whenever those values change. Let's say, for example, if I put the state cards here, so if the cards array change, for example, if we add a new object to it, or if we delete an object from it, so then there will be a change in the value of cards, and in that case this effect function will rerun. But we don't want to rerun this function, we just want to run this function once, and that is when at the time of mounting this component. Therefore, we will have nothing inside the dependency array, and there will be an empty array. So just remember that the second function, this second argument to the useEffect, this is called a dependency array, and when we pass an empty array, we are telling React to run this effect only once. And when once means just one time, when the component first mounts, and that is exactly what we want for this API call to get our data from this URL, which is served by our backend here, this data. So this was our useEffect, and this was the second argument was the dependencies array. Now that we have access to cards here, we can map over them, and we can pass all these props to our card.jsx, which will render the card for us. So let's save everything and run npm run dev, run our code, the front end. The backend is already running here. The backend is already running here. We can see it here. So after running the front end, we can go to the browser again, and go to our cards project, the backend. We need the front, and we see nothing here. Why? Let's check. So there must be some problem with the useEffect. Okay. We have defined the function, but we are not calling this function fetch cards. So like here is the try part, here is the cache part. We even forgot to write the code in the cache part. So we can do a console.log here. We can use console.error, like failed to fetch cards, and then we show the error that we get. And after that, we have a finally The finally block will run irrespective of if we run the try block or the catch block. If there is an error or if there is no error, the finally block will always run. And we do set loading, the other setter function that we have over here, set loading to false. We have initiated it by true, we set it to false. And then after this, we have to call this fetch cards, which we have defined over here. So we have defined it over here, but we are not calling it. That's why we don't see anything over here. So we have to call this function fetch cards. Now we go back and save everything and refresh, and we can see our cards over here. So we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 cards because our backend is supplying 4 cards over here. So our front end is showing 4 cards supplied by the backend. And everything is working. The hovering effect is working. We have all the data. Okay, let's go to the next stage. We can see that the cards are static here. So the next step is that we will add interactivity by introducing the ideas of selecting a card. Right at this moment, the cards are static and nothing happens if we click them or we try to select them. So now at this stage, the cards are purely presentational. They render data, but they don't respond to user actions. So by adding a selection, we are giving the component a new behavior. When the user clicks a card, it would become the active or selected card. So this is a common pattern in real applications. Think of choosing a pricing plan, selecting a product, or highlighting an item in a list. So for this, we have to create a new customized hook. We will call it use card selection. So let's go back to our src folder, and here we have hooks. We have no hooks here. We have a folder hooks, but inside we have no modules here. Let's create a new module here, use card selection. It's a JavaScript file, so the extension is .js. This hook encapsulates all selection logic. So first of all, we need to import useState and use callback from React. Export default function use card selection. Initial selected ID. Let's assign it a default value of null, and then the function body starts. We will start from state selected ID, and then we have a setter function set selected ID. We will initialize it with this initial selected ID. Then we have a function const select card, use callback. This will take an inline function which will get an argument of ID, and we will return We will call the setter set selected ID, and we will pass an inline functions with argument current, and then this will return current is equal to ID. If it is equal to ID, then we return null, otherwise we return ID. And the second argument is an empty array. So here we have created a function selected card, and this selected card decides what happens when a user clicks a card. It receives this ID of the card, and then it updates our selected ID state, this state, selected ID, using the setter function set selected ID. If the clicked card is already selected, which means that the current is equal to ID, then we deselect the card. We clear the selection. Otherwise, we select the card. The card that has this ID, we select it. So this function is doing both selection and deselection. Okay, let's talk about the array now. What is this array and why is it empty? This is the second argument to the useCall function, to the useCallback, and this is called a dependency array. By passing this empty array, we are telling React that this function depends on any change. It does not depend on any changing values. It never depends on any changing values. This means that React will create the function once and then reuse the same instance on every render. This keeps the function stable and prevents unnecessary re-renders of our card component. Now we type a function is selected, use callback, we use an inline function. This will get ID of the card as argument. We will check if selected ID is equal to ID, and then in the array of dependencies we have selected ID. So here in this line of code we are creating a small helper function which is called isSelected. It takes an ID and simply it checks whether that ID matches the currently selected ID. This is the currently selected ID. Is this currently selected ID the same as it has been passed with this ID? The currently selected card, we wrap it in use callback here so that the function stays stable between renders, and we list selected ID as a dependency. This selected ID, it is the dependency because the result of this function depends on whatever card is currently selected. Whenever this selected ID changes, React will recreate this function so it always returns the correct value. I hope that this is quite clear to you now. So what does this isSelected do actually? It answers just one question. Is this card the selected one? If the card's ID matches the selected ID, it returns true. This returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. This is used in the UI to decide whether to apply the card-selected class or not. So why are we wrapping it in a use callback? Because this function is passed down to the child components. Without this use callback, React would create a new function on every render. that can use unnecessary re-renders of every card component. So this use callback, it memoizes the function, so React uses the same instance unless dependencies change. So because of this dependency, selected ID, the function depends on this. So if the selected ID changes, the logic inside the function changes too. So React must recreate the function when that value updates. If this updates, so React will recreate the function. If we left this array empty, if we left this array of dependencies empty, then the function would always compare against the old selected ID, which would break the user interface. Now let's return an object, and we will be returning selected ID, the state, the function select card, and is selected. So we return this object which contains selected ID, select card, and is selected. This is how a custom hook exposes its public API. So anything we return here becomes available to the component that uses this hook. So selected ID, this selected ID, it tells us which card is currently selected. The selected card, it lets the user interface change the selection, and is selected lets each card check whether it should be highlighted or not. By returning these three pieces together in the form of an object, we keep all the selection logic in one place while giving the component exactly what it needs to render the correct user interface. So this was our custom hook. We are ready with our custom hook, and a custom hook is just a function, but it becomes powerful when it returns the values and functions that other components need. So the state, the value, and the other functions that we are returning, they will be used by the components that use this hook, and this makes it very powerful. Now let's go to the card.css and add this class card-selected and save it. Now we'll go to the card.jsx component. So our card component is getting this props. And now we are passing two new props, selected, and we give it a default value of false, and onSelect the function. Here to the card class name, we will add card-selected. Is selected. After this, we will add the function handle click. If onSelect, this onSelect that we get here is a props, onSelect, then call the function onSelect, which, if this is true, then call this function onSelect. So here we are defining a simple click handler for the card component. When the user clicks the card, this function runs. If the parent component has passed an onSelect function, we call it here. This is how the card notifies the parent that it was clicked without containing any selection logic itself. So the card component itself stays presentational, and the parent component, which in this case is the app component, it decides what selecting a card actually means. So the logic is not defined here, it's just totally presentational. The logic is defined somewhere else in the parent, and it's just calling that function defined in the parent component. This is the parent component. We will be using the hook use card selection that we made. But before that, let's just call this handle click here inside the article. On click, handle click. Now we go to the parent component app.jsx and import our use card selection from hooks folder. Then we introduce the state selected ID select card function and is selected. Sorry, it's not the state, it's the we are doing destructuring here. Selected ID select card and is selected, and we are destructuring it from the use card selection. So this is the object that we are returning here from the use card selection and our customized hook. We are destructuring it here in the app.jsx. So when we destructure it, we get these three things. And now we write if loading, then return main/main loading cards, and we give it a class name of app. And here the props that we are passing to the card component, the new one is selected, is selected card.id, and on select we pass it an inline function select card, and we pass it the card ID. So here this prop selected, it tells the card whether it should appear highlighted or not. Instead of the card component figuring that out itself, we give it a simple true or false value so it can render the correct visual state. And the next prop on select, it gives the card a callback to run when it is clicked. The card does not manage selection on its own. It just notifies the parent, and the parent updates the selected card. This keeps the card component clean and reusable while the parent controls the behavior. This is the classic React pattern. Parent owns the state and the child receives the state and the event handler. It keeps components predictable, reusable, and easy to test. Let's save everything So there is some problem because the page is just white. We cannot see our cards over here. Let's click inspect. After right click, go to the console and check uncard syntax error. The requested module src hook/usecardSelection.js does not provide an export name default. So there is some problem with the useCardSelections.js. useCardSelection.js. We are exporting it default and we are importing it here. So there is no problem with the import and the export. So, I see the problem. We can see here the three dots underlining it, telling us that there is some problem, the current, because here it is $R. And now we can save it here. This was a typo over here. And now if we go back and refresh it, so we should be able to see all our cards over here. So we see no difference when we select a card. There must be some problem with the CSS of the card. The CSS classes. Let's check our CSS. Okay, we have card selected over here. This seems to be okay. Our card component. Okay, I see here there is a typo over here. Cards flat, elevated, and outlines. These are the different variants. So there was a typo in this one. I have removed it. I have typed L over here. Now I save everything and go back, refresh it, and I can see now that the card is selected. Similarly, this one, we can see there is a difference of the border here between this selected card and the other cards. Like if we select this one, we can see that this is a selected card. Now this one is a selected one. So in this project, we have gone from a completely static user interface to a fully interactive React application. We started by building the card component and styling it. Then we introduced real data by creating a mock API and fetching it from our front end. From there, we added state, loading behavior, and side effects with useEffect. And finally, we made the user interface interactive by letting users select a card. To keep our logic clean and reusable, we moved the selection behavior into a custom hook, which is a pattern you will use again and again in real React applications. So at this point, we have a complete data-driven interactive user interface built with modern React patterns. If you have followed along, you now understand how to structure components, manage state, fetch data, handle user interactions, and extract reusable logic into custom hooks. This is the foundation of almost every real-world React project. I hope you enjoyed this project, and this is the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching this video.